Okay, this is day 21, January 21st, 2021, day after the inauguration. Everything went fine. Reading for today is Exodus 10 through 12. Okay, so God says, here we are, Israelites are slaves to the Egyptians. Pharaoh will not let, hold on a minute, gotta get my stuff. Pharaoh won't let the Egyptians go. So now we're on, okay, God says he'll send locusts. Now this is the 8th plague. Now when Pharaoh's slaves were in the room, they heard actually it was Moses, God speaking to Moses, and Moses telling Aaron what to say. We're still doing this thing. And anyways, Pharaoh's slaves were in the room, and they said, just let him go. You know, our country's destroyed, just let him go. And he said that everyone lies there should go. Oh, so here's the gig. Mo told Pharaoh that everyone and the livestock, the Israelites, everyone and the livestock should go. Because again, I want to remind you, Moses isn't telling Pharaoh the truth. He's not telling him, oh, well, we're going to leave and get out of slavery. He's telling them we're going to go worship God, right? And Pharaoh, obviously, is suspicious. He's like, really, right? So, anyways, let's see what here it says. I got this all written down because this went on a few times here. But Pharaoh said only the men should go. And he said just leave the little ones. But if you leave the little ones, of course, you're going to have to leave the women too. Because the little ones need to be fed by somebody. So, of course, you're going to have to leave the women if you leave the little ones. This isn't what's stated in the Bible, but this is what you assume. So, anyways, the locusts ate everything that the hail hadn't ruined. Now we come to find out why the Bible says that the hail didn't ruin the spelt in the wheat. In the was it the previous chapter or the chapter before? Yesterday's reading, whatever that was. So now remember, God keeps hardening Pharaoh's heart. Pharaoh will at first say, go, 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 just get out of here. But then God will harden Pharaoh's heart. I don't know, why is God doing this? God's still playing this mental game, which is affecting not just Pharaoh, but it's affecting Pharaoh's wife, Pharaoh's children, the slaves, all of the Egyptians, the slave children, the sex slave women. They didn't deserve this. Pharaoh didn't even deserve it because God's the one that's hardening his heart. Anyway, so after that, in chapter 12, verse 21, it says that no, it wasn't 12:21. I don't know why I put 12. I got this confused. 10 verse 21. I gotta change this. 10 verse 21, it says the darkness. The next plague was the darkness. Sorry, gotta get my pen here. And now, in my little footnotes here, it says that the darkness might have been what the desert storms, the windstorms, where the sand there'd be so much wind that the sand would blow up immensely and cover the sky so it looks dark. Okay, but this is another one of the plagues that didn't affect is the Jews. What we now call the Jews. They're calling the Israelites here. It said in the Israelites, let's see, but all the Israelites had light where they dwelt. That doesn't even make sense. How could that be possible? Anyways, again, verse 24, it says, Pharaoh says, go, 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 but leave all your livestock. Because now he's definitely suspicious, and it even says here in the Bible that now he's suspicious. And he says, and Moses, no, we need the livestock for sacrifice. We don't know which ones we're going to have to sacrifice till we get there. God's not telling us now. He'll tell us when we get to the sacrifice place. And Mo says no. And so then we get into chapter 11. Mo tells... Okay, I had to read this a few times, and I'm going to try and read it as I'm explaining it to you. Mo says... God tells Mo, who tells his people, that every man is to ask his neighbor and every woman her neighbor for silver and gold articles and for clothing. Now, it's assumed here, because the Egyptians are slaves, they probably don't have much, that they're asking, or I'm sorry, since the Israelites are slaves, they probably don't have much in the way of even livestock, but gold, silver, clothing. Clothing was a big thing. And, they didn't have like free clothing. Clothing you had to make. You had to make the thread to sew the clothing together back then. I mean, it was a big deal. And so, being their slaves, they probably didn't have any money. And so clothing was a luxury. And definitely jewelry was a luxury. For everybody, but especially for slaves. So we're assuming here that they're not borrowing, they're stealing basically from the Egyptians. Their neighbors being the Egyptians who actually had this stuff. And it says, the Lord indeed made the Egyptians well disposed toward the people. I'm not sure what that meant. I think that means they were well off. Or that might mean that they were a giving people. So they had no problem giving clothing and jewelry to the slaves. Now, it says here, I had to read this a few times. This is where the firstborn, now it doesn't say, neither in the King James Version nor the New American Bible does it say firstborn son. It just says firstborn. The firstborn of every, I don't want to say household, because a lot of slaves were part of the household. They actually lived in the household or lived on the property of their owner. So I would say like every family, but then family, what does that constitute? Like a lot of people consider, like they might have kids, but they still consider their parents their I don't know. This is confusing, but the firstborn of every, I'll say it this way, I guess what they mean is the firstborn of every female, including the livestock, was going to be murdered by God. Now, I had to read this a few times. It doesn't seem that Pharaoh was warned. absent, he will not let the Israel. All these servants of yours then shall go down to me. And yeah, it doesn't seem that Pharaoh was warned. Now this is chapter 11. Chapter 11 only has 10 verses. But this is where God tells Moses that he's going to do the, oh, I had the word, I looked the word up. There's a word for it. Basically, it's, you know, well, it's murder. It's like a mini genocide God's committing. Now, that's a short chapter. It's just talking about how God says he's going to do the slaughter, the murder of the firstborn. Chapter 12, oh, this was annoying. Chapter 12 starts out with the rituals of how the ritual of Passover got started. Now it says that before this murder, slaughter of the firstborn, the night before, well, actually you're supposed to prepare this a few nights before, because you're supposed to get a lamb. It could be from a goat or a sheep. And the lamb has to be a male, 1 month old, or 1 year old male, without blemish, meaning, you know, like they were like pure one color. I think it's supposed to be pure white. Here's white. This reeks of white supremacy here. Without any spots or markings. And it says, let's see, you're supposed to keep it, you're supposed to get it on the 10th day of the month, you're supposed to keep it to the 14th day of the month, and then you're supposed to slaughter it. And you're supposed to take the blood and sprinkle it on the doorpost. But it says using hyssop to paint it on to sprinkle it on the doorpost. Now I looked up hyssop and it kind of looks like lavender. It's been originally from the Mediterranean area. It's been brought over here to the United States. Integrated. It like I said, it looks like lavender, so maybe the common name here in the United States is lavender. Not sure about that. Get this is gross. The same night they shall eat its roasted flesh with unleavened bread and bitter herbs. It shall not be eaten raw or boiled, but roasted, so you have to cook it a specific way, with its head and shanks and inner organs. None of it must be kept beyond the next morning. Whatever is left over in the morning shall be burned up. There's a lot of waste for people who are like, basically, they're slaves, so they're starving to death, right? And there's a lot of waste going in here. And it's pretty gross to have to, and I would think it would be pretty hard to cook something like that, because it's still in, basically it's raw, you know, it's formed before it was slaughtered. It would seem that it would be pretty hard to cook. And make sure it got cooked all the way through. E. coli. And this is all ritual nonsense. This is like magic ritual stuff. And it keeps going on and on about how you're not to eat unleavened bread. And it actually says for 7 days there's supposed to be no eating of leavened bread, no yeast. What was there, a yeast shortage at the time? What was going on with the yeast? Why was yeast so bad? What did God have against yeast? But it actually says here in this chapter that any person that eats the yeast for them 7 days will be cut off from Israel. How stupid is that? And then it says you should have they should have a feast on the first day, and then the last day there should be, you know, first day and last day should be some type of celebration. Now, okay, let me see if I got anything else here that's of importance. Tried to write it down because a lot of stuff I forget. Okay, so then this death of the firstborn. Okay, now this is what I want to mention. There's no mention. And like I said, I read this like 3 times in the New American Bible and twice on the audio version of the King James. There's there's no mention that Moses and Aaron told Pharaoh, I don't know if I already told you this, told Pharaoh or the other Egyptians about this blood magic ritual necessary to save their kids and livestock. And I don't think it was just the blood. I think you had to do the whole ceremony with the Passover, the not eating of the leaven. I think it was all included in there as part of this not killing of the firstborn. So isn't this a little bit unfair, especially to the women who are, at that time, there's a very good chance that, there's a decent chance that a woman would die giving birth, right? Because they didn't know about hand washing, they didn't have any antibiotics, they didn't sterilize. If a baby was breech, a lot of times the mother died because they didn't have the wherewithal. They definitely didn't have cesarean section there then. They didn't know, and they're putting their filthy hands inside the mother's. I mean, women had just problems galore with yeast infections, urinary tract infections. They didn't know about wiping front to back. They didn't know anything about this. And the water was not coming from their faucet. They would have to go down to the river and pull the water out, and hopefully the water wasn't infected with a bunch of parasites and stuff that lead that could, do them harm. And they didn't know about keeping clean. They didn't know how to prevent yeast infection, urinary tract infections. They didn't know any of this. So women were giving their lives to birth these children, because this tradition, that's all women were good for, was to rape and have children, and only sons. So women were giving their lives to have a child that they didn't know the gender of. And if they didn't have a son, they were considered dispensable. Don't tell me female murder and honor killings was not part of, I think that just didn't make the cut of the Bible. Don't tell me that didn't happen at this time when men were favored and male sons were favored. So anyways, now God is murdering these children, a genocide, these children that these women, some did die to birth. And you're saying that this God is anti-abortion? Baloney. Okay, maybe he's anti-abortion, and then after they're born, all's fair game. Anyways, this really ticks me off, because it doesn't even seem like Pharaoh had a chance here, because Pharaoh was not told, and none of the community was told either. So they didn't. And why is the community paying for Pharaoh's decision, which really isn't Pharaoh's decision, because God's doing it. God's hardening Pharaoh's heart. Okay, so anyway, so after all this, remember the female livestock lost their firstborn too. After this, God says, get out of here, go, leave, you're just awful people. And yeah, they're awful people and an awful God. Your God is a jerk. Let's see, I might not have read this line. Oh, and here at the chapter 12, 35 through 36, God basically robs the Egyptians of their valuables. Again, here it says, I don't know, this is like the same as the second verse of the same, no, let me see. Chapter 11, it seems that's the same. The Israelites did ask Moses, as Moses commanded, they asked the Egyptians for articles of silver and gold for clothing. Basically, they were being bullies. Like, if you don't give us all your stuff, we're going to send more plagues on you. And so basically, God and Moses are robbing the Egyptians of their stuff before they go. And, let me see, I guess I didn't read the whole chapter. I thought it ended there. Now Now, it's talking, oh, I did read this in the King James Version. It's just talking about the rules and regulations for Passover, which are kind of convoluted. It's talking about, outside people shouldn't partake of the Passover, but your slaves should be part of the Passover. The males must be circumcised. The males who are partaking of the Passover must be circumcised. But then it says the law shall be the same for the resident alien as for the native. It just contradicted itself, it seems. And so that's when they left Egypt, after they had their Passover meal. I have not yet seen a verse in the Bible that makes me want to like God. He seems very, no, he doesn't seem, he is very vengeful, manipulative, game playing, like playing these games with Pharaoh. About, oh, I'll tell him to, do this, and then when he says, okay, I'll do this, then I'm going to harden his heart and have him do something else, and then I'm going to punish him because for what I did to him, whatever. So anyways, day 21, day after the inauguration, everything went fine. I read an article online that said, as much as these mega maggots were planning these revolts and insurrections and all this for Inauguration Day, there were supposed to be various ones between the 16th and the 20th of January this month. And we had that Capitol thing on January 6th, which was before that. But I haven't heard anything between the 6th and the 20th, or 16th and the 20th, where any violence has happened due to it. I mean, it said there were small little, local, pro-Trump, QAnon, garbage, nonsense, but it was all peaceful, or at least compared to what happened on January 6th. But then, the 20th was supposed to be the big one, where everybody was supposed to go into all their state capitals, and all the pro-Trump supporter wackadoos are supposed to go to the capitals and do these big protests, and there was talk of violence going to happen, among the people that were promoting these quote-unquote protests. It was actually supposed to, some people were saying, let's not protest, let's riot, is basically what they were saying. But I look in the article, and hardly anyone showed up to any of these capitals. I think some capitals had nobody show up, but there was a couple of, one person showed up, and what was it, Maine? And then, the most, there was a group of 6 people, and I can't remember what, I think it was Texas. In Texas, you would think Texas would be the big one. But, nobody showed up. And the people who did show up, the few people who did show up, they said they were very disappointed. One person said, I drove 45 minutes to get here, and I was expecting people, and I'm the only one that showed up. And there was another person said that they drove from somewhere. It must have been far away, because he made sure to mention that he drove all the way from somewhere. And they were saddened to see that only a few other people had showed up. So, it was pretty funny. I was thinking, now again, I'm saying, in my other video, I don't think it was the one related to Bible reading. I did say that there were 2 competing ideas of, I'm going to try and keep that on, of how this should run with like Twitter and stuff. But Twitter and Tumblr and Parler and all these sites they're privately owned. So, you know, the CEOs and such make the rules, terms of use, and if you violate them, they have the right to kick you off, or at least give you warning so many times before they kick you off. Most of them have terms of use that specifically state there is not to incite harm or violence. Anything, you know, at the very least, the post will get deleted, but you can get your account suspended or banned from the site. And they can do this because they're privately owned. Now, I don't know what, oh, Michael Moore was saying that he doesn't like the idea of banning people, banning people completely off these sites for inciting violence or riots or whatever. Because he says, well, we won't know what they're doing. We have no way of knowing what they have planned. Who was the other one? Oh, Matt Dillahunty is the one who says he does like the idea of it being banned. Good. And I have to kind of side on Matt Dillahunty's side with this because, you know, the days of yore with radio, hard copy newspaper, books, did I say the mail, telephone calls, people aren't using that anymore. As a matter of fact, people that use that, even though it's a smart way of doing things, are considered backwards and uneducated and out of date and out of touch. So how else would they be able to cohesively make these plans for these riots if they're not allowed to use these online platforms? Right? Because, no, like I said, nobody's doing it used to be before the internet. It was the radio. It was the newspaper. It was flyers being mailed to the house. Before the radio, it was flyers being mailed to the house in order to work, you know, mouth to mouth communication. So I do think that, you know, and I think that's why nobody showed up to these planned riots, because they just had no way to organize because everybody's doing it online. And mostly, let's admit it, mostly it's laziness. It's easy just to easy and free just to type something out on Twitter and send it out there, as opposed to having to pay for flyers, pay for ad space in the newspaper. Plus, online it's anonymous. Like if you pay for an ad in the paper, you have to pay, and that payment has what they used to call a paper trail, though it's not really paper anymore. But it has a trail that leads back to the person who paid for the ad. So I think banning people, or certain types of groups and platforms on these various sites helps. I mean, I think that's the biggest help to stopping all the riots. Because otherwise, how else would they communicate? How else would they be making plans? And I can see Michael Moore's point if people were still using the radio, newspaper, flyers, phone calls to organize all this stuff, but they're not. And so anyways, it was pretty funny to see that nothing happened. Nobody showed up to these things. And the people who did show up, they're probably going to say, forget it, I'm not doing it again, because nobody showed up this time. I'm not wasting my time, I'm not wasting my gas, I'm not wasting wear and tear on my vehicle. One person who came, the one who drove 45 minutes to come to the to this planned protest, and he was the only one, he had made up a bunch of signs. He had a whole bunch of signs made up. So he paid for that.